I'll call this meeting of the Public Works Committee to order. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 16th day of September 2020. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, the Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We have everyone in attendance except for Chairman Creefall, who's on vacation, I believe, right? All right, we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Consent agenda. Anybody have any questions or concerns? If not, I would look for a motion to approve. I have a motion from Doug and a second from John. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. So that takes us to discussion items, update on the Commuter Express.
Check. He's on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you have in your packet the latest ridership numbers for Commuter Express. As you know, we've been handing this to the committee for the last several months to look at that. So you'll see that we were hoping that the numbers were trajectorying up, albeit slowly going up. And you'll see that in August, we actually had a slight dip back down. Joy is joining us, our transit manager from via Zoom. So you'll see her up on the screen as well. So you see with the stay-at-home work order, stay-at-home order, safe at home, we did down to 500, and then we jumped back up to 991, went up just over 1,000. Now we're at 944. So you can see it's hovering right around the 1,000, right? Give or take. Now these are riderships per month, and so you got to look at it. That's kind of it may be a 60 or 70 down, but over the course of a month, it's not a great percentage wise, but it is not trending up. We're again looking at the numbers. We're kind of peaking up 991, it's creeping up to 1,000, and now we're back down. So maybe that's the new norm. Maybe people are still at home. But why we're bringing this up is that we are looking at with our Commuter Express, as you know, a new contract starting January 1st. If this is something you want to look at to end the program or terminate the program, now is kind of the time of that sweet spot because we have budget going on. We got the new contract coming. But is this something you want to continue and look at for the course of the next year? We are looking good from a funding standpoint with the CARES Act dollars that were received from the federal government. We received 2.8 million. We're looking at using about 1.8 million this year and another million next year. So the transit program itself is actually doing very well financially because of the CARES Act funds that came in to it. So it's not like a funding issue that we're looking at closing. It's a matter of, that we only have basically 1,000 rides now a month, which is about, we used to have around 5,000 last year to 6,000 a month. So we're quite a bit down. So we're looking at that direction today. As you've seen these numbers for a couple of months now, as you review this, I would say, hey, why don't we look at potentially terminating it? That would have a couple public hearings, at least one public hearing to do that, to end that service. So the public would have a chance to actually comment if they want that service or not want that service. Or if we just kind of let it ride and say, well, we're just still in the middle of this pandemic right now. And we are, unfortunately. And so if we let it ride for another year, and we'll bring these numbers back to you over the course of next year. And at this time of the budget next year, we really look at it again and say it's time to really look at it and say, hey, look, the numbers did rebound, or, well, we're still at 1,000. And it just doesn't look good. And we had a vaccine for hopefully 6 months by now and all that kind of stuff. We say it's now the time to really consider, terminating that contract. What I don't want to do is, what I prefer not to do, is that we also in February we look at it and going, okay, now we want to terminate the contract. We just got this new contract on board. They ramped up the service, and now we just kind of pulled the rug off from underneath them. Looking at least a year is that we're looking at for them to get it in. They have some marketing ideas coming in, and we're looking at some electronic stuff for like paying as you go with your phone type of stuff like that. So making it more user friendly than it is right now, of either exact cash on hand or going to the grocery store to get a ticket. Again, so that might help our ridership as well going forward. But, there's a lot of businesses that are going to the work from home model. We just don't know what that's going to look like, going on in the future. So that's really the discussion point today is what we're looking at is, do you want us to pursue potentially determination right now, or do you want to let it kind of ride? And we'll certainly bring the numbers back to you. This is a report we got to give to the state and feds anyway. So the report that you see in front of you it's really simple to provide, and we can provide it every month. We will put it in the consent agenda if we decide to continue, versus discussion every month, just to say, yep, the numbers are X, at least show you the numbers. So that's why it's open to discussion right now, as the committee here has kind of got the purview of, this is a policy decision of should we have the Commuter Express or not, and how should we, operate that going forward.
When we look at the monthly numbers, like August, for instance, 944, is that 944 people each way? You know what I mean? If somebody rides down to Milwaukee in the morning and rides back at night, is that one ride or two?
I believe that's two. I'll let Joy, so we can try out Joy on the Zoom and see how we can.
Yeah, it's each ride, so it's not each person. So if we're talking about monthly rides, it's the same people who are traveling 2 rides per day.
So if you think about it, it's roughly 460 people over the course of the month,
Per month.
give or take.
Comments?
Okay. My feelings are, since we have the funding in place, we're still in COVID, we don't know what the true numbers are supposed to be. I would say we let it ride a year and watch close and kind of discuss it as the year goes through, and then decide whether or not we want to pull the plug on this program.
Doug?
I would agree. I think it'd be premature to discuss eliminating a service, especially if we have the funding to get through probably another year. I think it's, like I said, premature to discuss that or consider that, I guess.
I was on the verge of saying, let's kill it, but I agree that more data is going to come in, especially if we're going to advertise and make it easier to pay. Maybe we give it at least 6 months or 8 months and prepare ourselves to make a tough decision then. Anybody else?
I agree. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think this whole COVID thing has to play itself out, and then when it's done, we can reevaluate at that time.
Watch what you wish for. It might take longer than we hope.
If it's okay with the committee, we would put these numbers in the consent agenda every month. And if you decided that at 1 month you want to pull it out, or if we see something that's really an anomaly, we'll put it maybe in a discussion item going forward. That we at least have the numbers every month. And
That's agreeable.
See them going forward.
All right, we'll move on to the shared ride taxi.
Okay, I'll start with this one. Again, Joy is available via Zoom. If the committee recalls, we were working with Ozaki County to potentially merger the two transit services together. We obviously have the shared transit manager position. One of the reasons to do that merger was to be able to cross the county lines efficiently and effectively. As you know, right now we stop at Newburgh. So if someone wants to ride to the Grafton Hospital, regardless of where they live in Washington County, they have to drive to Newburgh, they got to call Washington County Shared Ride Taxi, then set up a ride to Newburgh, call Ozaki County Shared Ride Taxi, get a ride from there to wherever they're going, and then make sure they contact the Shared Ride Taxi at the same time to get a ride back to Newburgh, and then contact our services again to get a ride back from Newburgh. So it's a lot of coordinating on the person's effort, as you can imagine that, you got to make a phone call, get the first one set up, then the second one set up, then you got that one guaranteed. Where you might have to change your time slightly. So that's why you can't set that return one up right away. So it's a very cumbersome on the individuals, not to mention that it does get cold in winter. We have this little bus shelter out there. The gas station that's there is now full service again and up and running, I believe, Newburgh, so they can actually go inside if they want to. But if they're elderly or disabled, it's kind of more of a challenge, right? To get out, go into a building, get out of a building when your ride comes in, or sit outside in the shelter in the rain, or even on a sunny day, it might be hot, right? You know, like it's cold, but you might be too hot to sit outside because they might have an issue or concern. So what this pilot program is promoting is that we would, for the course of next year, transfer those county residents from us right to a resident, right to where they're going in Ozaukee County. So we would be able to, if a person called in Jackson want to go to Grafton, we give them a ride right to Grafton. If they want to go from Germantown to Port, they go right from Germantown to Port. Now it's a share ride taxi, so there might be a stop or two on the way because that's what the service provides. We would be basically getting them right to that point. The only thing they wouldn't be able to do would be to pick up in Ozaukee County. We can drop people off in Ozaukee County, but we can't pick people up because that would be duplicating the service on a federal and state level. So what we'd be looking at doing in Ozaukee County would then bring them back from Ozaukee County and drop them off in any location inside Washington County. So it's an MOU. Remember, understanding that we would both do that. And then we got stuff in the MOU that if you've read it, to who pays what when all that kind of stuff. We're looking at about a $25,000, $25,500 addition. Now we're not asking for additional money into the budget because we have the CARES fund next year to help, make that up. So we're looking at, is that something that we want to pursue? Working with Ozaukee County to cross those county lines for at least the course of a year, and then come back and see what does that look like then? Is it something we got to continue? How are the rides looking like? When we were talking about merger, sewer pack did analysis, what they think the ridership was going to be. This is a little easier system. It's 2 phone calls versus 4. We're trying to get that with our vendor. Our vendor and Ozaukee County's vendor is the same. For efforting have it being 1 phone call. Is what we're really trying to shoot for with our vendor. We're not sure when exactly we can get to that point, but we're hoping because they use the same software behind the scenes that we might be able to call one dispatch another. They can see the ridership. So we're working with our vendor on that one to see how they can actually set that up behind the screen. So maybe it's a 1-call shop, as you can imagine. That's key because they're maybe elderly, disabled, or just even with the ridership, just confusing of I had to call this one, set up a ride, and I call the other one. I can't get another ride, and I got to call the other one back to set up a different time. It's very cumbersome for the user. We're trying to make it as simplified as possible to cross the county lines. And I would look at numbers saying, okay, how many people came our way, how many people came their way, and where were those rides coming from and going, and how are we going to charge for that? That's part of what's in the MOU. And we are looking right now at kind of a flat fee is you do our mileage in the county to the county line, wherever that magical line happens to be. And then once you cross the county line, you would pay a fee. We don't have that number yet, but it's $3, $5, $6, whatever it is to get into Ozaukee County. So then that money will then come back to us to help pay for that, what's called deadhead mileage. So once that person gets dropped off in Port Washington or Grafton or Mequon, that van can't pick somebody up. So they got to drive all the way back to Washington County before they can pick somebody up. That's called deadhead. There's nobody else in the vehicle. They're not getting any revenue hours for that particular ridership. So one thing we are looking for, which I had asked to be added to the spreadsheet of outcomes, the one that looks kind of like this, was to potentially look at that merge service again. You'll see that in the MOU and in this document, there was no mention of potentially merging in the future. And I think that's one thing that we should still look at if it makes sense to do that, because you might have more opportunities for federal state funding by merging versus the deadhead miles that we're having right now. So that's one thing I want to make sure we're looking at as a potential outcome down the road as well, that maybe the merger makes sense financially as well. Maybe the deadhead things makes more sense keeping them separate, but I think it's important to let Ozaukee County know that that's still in the back of at least my head, that it might make more sense financially to merge someday. So with that, that's kind of the overview of the pilot program. Again, we're not looking for a budget increase on our transit. We are utilizing the CARES Act funds that can get swapped into another program to pull that money out to accomplish this for next year. And we're excited to offer this up to the citizens of not only Washington County, but Ozaukee County as well. We do think we'll get a lot of people taking advantage of this program and utilizing it. We'll have to obviously have a Enjoy Knows a marketing campaign to get this thing rolling, to make sure people know how to do this and how to make sure it's out there and available for them to utilize. Now, again, we still have tight ridership, just like Ozaukee County, and the morning rush and the afternoon rush. So it might not be perfect. We are looking at, we have another vehicle or two that we can help supplement that ridership. So we're looking at doing that as well. So hopefully we want it to succeed.
Any comments?
I don't know if Joy wants to add anything. If I forgot, so the Ozaukee County met on this last week, I believe, and they did approve it, their Public Works Committee. So it was approved by their Public Works Committee just last week.
Yeah, and Ozaukee County had a few comments. One, they really did want to go with the flat fare. And then the fare we suggested was $5.75, which is the maximum fare for elderly and disabled riders in Ozaukee County. It's very close to that also in Washington County. Yeah, and yeah, really the purpose of the pilot program is to determine the long-term feasibility of providing this type of service. You're making sure that we're getting the numbers to justify you continuing cross-county service and possibly doing a merger.
I'll bring in this, we've been talking about this since when I was first on this committee about 5 years ago or 4. And I thought it was a good idea then, and I think it's a good idea now. I hope we can work through the kinks, but that's what a pilot program is for. But I had a couple questions. First of all, the flat rate, if somebody ends up going all the way to the western end of the county, you know, we would have more zones than Ozaukee County would have zones, so we could end up with an additional cost, right?
It's about, so we base ours on mileage, not zones. So they have 3 zones. We have a mileage thing. And so if you think about it that way, that when we drive into Ozaukee County, because Ozaukee County is a little smaller county, that our ride should be a little less time. It really depends on where they're coming, where they're going, right? If you're going from Germantown to the port, well, that's a longer ride. But if you're going from Jackson to Cedarburg, that's a shorter ride. So it really depends on where they're coming and where they're going. But the odds of them going from Cedarburg to town of Erin, probably not real high, but maybe Cedarburg to Hartford to the hospital or something like that. So it comes down to where are they coming from, where are they going to, where that line in the map, right? How far are they going into Ozaukee County? How far are they coming into Washington County? Our county being a little wider, they have a better opportunity to go a little bit further potentially, and they would have more that have miles driving back. We just don't know where those people are all coming and going from right now. And that's one of the reasons for the pilot program going, well, are they going to the hospital in Grafton? Are they going to, a workplace in Port Washington? Are they going to our hospital in Hartford or St. Joe's? So we just don't know what that looks like yet coming back. But if you can imagine someone going from Port Washington to Hartford, that's a lot of mileage inside of Washington County that they're going. But someone's going from, West Bend to Port, it's not that many mileage inside of Ozaukee County because they're just a narrower, smaller county. So
I would also add that looking through all the data we were given here, the outcomes and everything, this presentation is really well thought out and presents a lot of information to us. So thank you and Joy for that.
that would be Joy, yes.
Thank you, Joy. Doug?
Thank you. I started reading through this document and I had a lot of questions at first, and the more I read, the more clarification I got. So thank you for that. I think it's an interesting approach, interesting program. I think there's a lot of things that will work itself out once it starts. I do think there's going to be a lot more single rides versus shared rides because of the distance they have to travel. I don't know how that works. If somebody is in the county, shared ride, and they have to go to Ozaukee County, does that person go with and come back to go to another ride? I guess those are things that all got to be worked out, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And I guess some of the details, like I said, as the program goes on, you'll probably find more things that have to be worked out. But again, like I said before, the pilot program is perfect timing because of the CARES Act funding.
Mhm.
There shouldn't be any increase for Washington County, so it's, in my eyes, it's a perfect time to do it as well. So I guess that's just my comments on it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, it sounds like we're all in agreement, so I think what we should do is get this going. Does this have to go to full county board for approval?
Yes, we believe so. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to, because Ozaki County's been looking this over for 6 months, maybe, Joy, 5 months, something like that.
They've been talking about it for a few months, but the full proposal, they were only presented this past.
So it's been kind of going to their committee kind of, throughout the time. So what we want to do is we want to present this as just a discussion item for today. We bring it back to you as an action item next month, and then we go to the county board after that. Again, we're working with our county attorney to make sure that's our correct procedure, if that's what Ozaki County is doing. So we're also a county government, so we think that's the same procedure. But what we want to do is we don't want to just push this at you, all this information going, okay, here you go, give us a decision today. Knowing that Ozaki has been discussing this and thinking about this. And again, they maybe didn't have all the I's and T's for the last, 3-4 months, but they've at least been thinking about it and talking about it. And is this a good idea? And we didn't just feel comfortable enough saying, here's, 15 pages and, vote yes, please. We're going to make sure you have time to think about it now. And then obviously bring it back next month for a vote. And then go to county board after that.
So.
Ozaki County, I'm sorry.
Will it be brought to the county board for a discussion item to let them think about it before or not? Okay. Joy?
So I just wanted to point out that, Ozaki County, they voted on the pilot proposal, but they have not fully approved the MOU yet. So because we didn't want to approve the MOU without even discussing it with you. So, now is the time that we, in this next month, we'd want to make changes to the MOU and make sure that that's agreeable to both counties, excuse me, before the counties vote on that piece, because that's a piece that the board will need to approve.
And we'll provide it to our county attorney to look over too, just if you got any comments. You imagine making comments now, making changes and coming back, all kind of stuff. We'd rather have it out in the open here. Check comments, changes, we can make those. You'll see the county attorney if he agrees or not agrees, and then bring it back for a final vote. So that's kind of why we're looking at bringing all the information to you here today as a first step. The next step will be bringing back the final version that Ozaki's looked at, their attorney looked at, our attorneys looked at, and bring it back to you next month.
Marcy? Yeah, I know. The light to come on.
There we go. Okay. As far as the MOU and getting the agreement together, if we have to bend a little bit to make Ozaki County happy, I think we should do that, just because we've worked so hard to try and get something like this to happen. And the fact that they're even considering it is a huge step on their part. And this is important for the people using the system. They don't have to sit in that shelter. That's a big win.
Yes.
So whatever it takes, I think we need to do that.
I agree, and I'll add that I really hope that this pilot program works out and we get really good numbers, because combining them in the long run would be a win-win for everybody, I believe. And it's been a long time coming. It'll be good for our citizens. It'll be a good service, I hope.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on to action items, Facilities Management Division.
Well, I'll start just because I like to talk. So you have in front of you the facility management budget. I guess if you have any questions on it, we can certainly answer any questions. Margie is here as well from finance to answer any questions that you may have on the budget packet. You'll see the format is very similar to what we've used in years past. A simple one which is a 2-page document going forward for not only this budget, but all the other budgets you'll see coming for you going forward. So you'll see the numbers in the front, and then the back end, you'll see the highlights of this year and then the goals looking forward. So, so I guess the process is, if you have any questions, we're here to answer any questions for you instead of going through it like line by line. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's what the other committees are doing, Margie. Yes.
Under expenditures and other uses for central fuel, other financing uses, there's a huge change.
If you could point me to that. So Kara Hergich is here at facilities, and if she wants to step up to the microphone to the right of Margie, and we can maybe bring that up on the screen, Mary. Is that possible? Or Margie?
And well, and
Or
a
Mark
little
wants to take
background
this?
for that too. It's Central Fuel is an internal service fund, so it operates kind of like a business. So they have their own fund balance. So in that fund, the other financing sources up in the revenues and the other financing uses down in expenditures is normally the addition or use of fund balance in that fund. That's an accounting tool we use to balance that fund. So there's no direct tax levy shown going to that fund. So it'll fluctuate from year to year based on either the rates or the usage and how we kind of estimate revenues will come in and what expenditures are.
Thank you. Okay. Doug?
Under the government center personnel, I see there's a reduction of 53,000. Is there a position eliminated or?
No, there's not a position eliminated. It's just a reallocation of our labor based off of what our actual, where our people are actually doing more work. But we do not have any plans to modify our staffing model.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's move on. Oh. Will, motion, Doug, second. So all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Thank you. So we'll move on to Highway Department. You'll get to speak more, Scott.
Sure. You see in front of you the highway department's budget. Again, holding that 0% that the administration was looking for in their budget. We were able to accomplish that. Highlights, obviously, we've got the use of the other financing sources, which is the money that we actually borrowed. Remember that the previous county board borrowed funding for road projects. So you see we're utilizing those funds up for our road construction projects now going forward. So that's kind of one of the bigger amounts that you'll see in there of changes utilized of the $4 million in revenues and other sources for 2020, utilizing those budgeted funds, those borrowed funds, bonded funds for road projects. So that's probably the biggest one that you see in there. With that, any questions, I'd be certainly happy to answer any of those for you.
Yeah, the second line, the revenues from Washington County was quite a bit higher than expected. Is that reflective of that loan, or is that something else?
The loan, I believe it was the look, it's about a little over $3 million of the sales tax funds, I believe.
More than
So it's a kind of a combination of the revenues coming in for the highway enterprise fund. So I believe that's not only just the loan amounts, but also the sales tax amounts. I have to look at the accounts behind the scenes if Margie's bringing those up.
So highway is also kind of unique. The highway enterprise fund, again, operates like a business. one of the funds they charge is what's called the CRAB, or the County Roads and Bridges Fund, which is also shown on this summary page. So as the highway department does work on county roads, the County Roads and Bridges funds pay for that. So that's the Washington County revenues shown in the enterprise fund. So it may have just been a little shifting of projects between either state projects and highway project or county highway projects, or we just were able to take on a little bit more county highway work. So more funds came from the CRAB fund than had been budgeted originally.
I think it also has to do with how we budget the projects from year to year. You know, because sometimes you know a big number in one year, but you have little expenses kind of leading up to that project, and when do they actually hit the books?
John?
The estimated actual, is that taking the whole COVID with the taxes going down? The revenues are going down because of COVID?
So we did not decrease sales tax revenues to the highway department because we considered it a priority area. We instead cut sales tax from some other areas such as parks for like the trail plan. So we tried to cut things from sales tax that would not have a significant impact on county priorities. So highway was not impacted by that.
Thank you.
So under county roads and bridges, there's another big change in other financing sources. Is that another case where we're taking money out of the,
That's the combination of fund balance and the use of debt proceeds.
thank you.
Under the revenue and other sources summary tab, there's a line in there that says anticipated less use of fund balance. Could you explain that to me? And second part of that question is, does this budget include using fund balance for highway for the 2021 budget?
Yes, we anticipate utilizing fund balance for this budget. So the highway department is set up as an enterprise fund. So we have the funds available that we don't know what like the winter is going to be this coming year. So we have a fund balance carryover every year. The county board set that amount that I believe was around 50% of our budget we want to hang over from year to year. So in the highway enterprise funds having that really good year, right? That we have additional funds and revenues that are in there and available to actually utilize. So no matter of how we're going to use those funds. So it's one thing we can utilize those fund balances, make sure we're still at a safe amount, at 50%. But we want to make sure we're not keeping too much of the fund balance either, and also creeping up to 20-25% and keep that number keep rising up. So I want to make sure we're using that fund balance to keep around that 15% or so that was set by the county board. So yes,
So is this,
we are using fund balance, yes.
okay, so when you say fund balance, is there a separate fund balance for the county as a whole
Yes,
and a separate
Yes.
fund balance?
this is our highway department, our own little entity over there, kind of just like Samaritan, right? So it's our own little entity. We have our own little fund balance that we carry over from year to year. Again, it's about 15% of our budget amount to make sure that if we have a bridge go down or a bunch of culverts that failed or the really bad winter, that we have money to make sure we don't have to go back to the general fund and ask them for additional revenue. We'd have that money on hand to make that purchase, or let's say our paver went down or something like that. We got to have a new paver or something like that. We'd have that funds available to actually, make that happen. So as enterprise funds, we have those carryover funds from year to year. We just want to make sure that number doesn't get too high going
Okay.
forward.
The reason I ask is because when I see or saw a fund balance
Right.
and the county executive is telling us we're not, our 2021 budget is not using fund balance.
Right.
And I saw it in here, that's why I
Oh,
was
yep.
asking. But
Two
it makes
completely
sense that you have
yeah.
separate.
Two completely separate accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Under expenditures for highway, just a question, the budgeted amount was 4 million, but the actual was 7.6. Why was there the big difference? What did we do different?
Which line you at? Because sometimes there's different ones do the same thing.
Under
Under highway enterprise fund.
under expenses, county highway construction,
Construction.
sorry. original budget was for 4 million, but we ended up with 7.6.
And I think that's where we had the revenue from the sales tax put in there as well. Even though we didn't utilize it, we got to put it somewhere. We've got the sales tax in from the county, so it's going to go into county highway projects. We didn't do the projects this year. We're kind of holding on to that fund to use next year on county highway W, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So Dave Owens is with finance. He does all our finance behind the scenes. For us, our budget sheets are massive, and this kind of condenses it all down. So it's kind of hard to determine where exactly which numbers we're putting in which columns.
So when we prepare the budget for the county roads and bridges fund, we're putting the same amount of money pretty much in the county roads and bridges fund each year. Certain amount of sales tax, certain amount of property tax. So it's like the grant fund is just kind of like a big piggy bank where we keep all the highway funds. In some years we have a lot of projects, and so we spend a lot. In some years we don't have as many projects. So when we budget the county roads and bridges fund, we kind of match the expenditures in the budget to generally match the amount of money that's going in. Now, in any particular year, there might be a lot more spending than what we actually budgeted, because we just budgeted the amount of spending to match the amount of funding that we're putting in, which is generally level. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Well,
Does to you.
I added aside to that is that we have a plan. We don't just spend the money if we have the money. We have a plan of what we're gonna do any given year and understand what you're saying.
Yeah, generally when we budget the amount of spending coming out of the grant fund, it's generally matches what's in the capital improvement plan. But the capital improvement plan, that's the plan, but when the actual projects, when they actually get done, don't necessarily match the capital improvement plan. That's why the actual amount spent in the grant fund should be way different than what's budgeted.
Or in short, it's an accounting thing.
Better.
As far as how you get the money in, we have it, doesn't mean we spent that in that given year. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Do you need a motion on highway and then on engineer, or we cover the county engineer under highway also? You know what I'm asking?
So the county engineer was not listed separately as an action item, but it was put underneath the county highway department budget. So it looks like two separate budget sheets because it's its own budget sheet. So, but underneath highway, right? So if you have
Okay.
questions under the highway
So we
engineer,
can go on to engineer now.
and with that one, you can see we're looking at reducing the levy impact for that position. So our county engineers out there on our construction projects, managing them throughout the course of the year. We added this position a few years back with the anticipation that they'd be off the levy or have very minimal levy impact. So you imagine, instead of us spending $90,000 for a construction inspector to be out there for 3 months, we could hire this person for less than that to be a full-time county employee for a year-long service. And so when he's working on those construction projects, he's actually getting paid by the highway department for that work. And a lot of that work is being funded on the back end by sales tax, right? So if we do a project for sales tax, he's getting paid basically out of the sales tax, not out of the county levy. And then those other months throughout the year, he's getting those projects ready for us, helping us with that, but also working for facilities with projects with them, or parks with projects for them. So when he's working with facilities will pay his salary. When he's working for parks, so he keeps track of his time throughout the year and gets paid for whoever he's doing that work for. So you can see that he's out on the road quite a bit this year. So we're anticipating it being less. We know that Howie W is going to be a long project for him next year. So we know there's going to be anticipated revenue going in next year because he's going to be out on that project a little more so than this year. We had 2 smaller projects, remember, FD and now County Highway D, where next year Highway W is a larger project and going to be out there longer. It's not going to have that lag time in the middle of the summer. But we are efforting to get him, off the levy and on that, as much as possible.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, with that, I'd entertain a motion for the highway department budget. Marcella, second from John. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Next is transit division. Is
So-
that you, Scott, or?
Yep,
Joe?
that's me. I'll start with this one. So Joy is available for any questions that you have there. So again, the important one is that we met our levy goal of keeping the same levy amount from the 2020 budget going forward, so the 658,000. Again, we're looking at with the, looks like a number got shortened up there, all pound signs. But we're looking at that with the CARES Act funds that's coming in, that with this pilot program that you see in front of you, just discussed earlier, as well as some other projects that we're looking at doing along with our interfaith caregivers and stuff. We'll feel that we'll be able to easily be at that budget or even a little bit less. Just tough with the CARES Act to figure out what we're all going to utilize it for next year and where that's going to look. So with the transit system at the end of the year, if we have excess funds available, it goes right back into the levy. That's your general levy, not the highway. That's not levy, but the account, the general fund, it goes back into the main general fund, not the highway general fund. So we don't keep that money. Transit doesn't keep that money from year to year. We don't go out and buy 12 new vehicles. But that money goes, any money left over at the end of the year will go right back into the general fund. But we're looking at potentially being right around that number and hopefully a little bit less based on the CARES Act funding.
Questions?
Full of questions today.
Good. Yeah.
Is there's no county personnel in the transit budget?
Oh, no, there is the position. I'm not sure which one we put under, if that was under other expenses.
So there's no direct personnel.
Oh, direct
budgeted,
personnel? No.
But we do pay for a portion of Joy,
Yeah.
and that's through the purchase services with Ozaki County.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So she is an Ozaki County employee, not a Washington County employee. So we just pay them for her services.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there are a couple things. Under other expenses, our estimated total was 70,000. It's like double what we expected. Is that the advertising you were talking about before, or part of that?
I'd have to defer to Margie what that account number is.
Yeah, actually, that's highlighted in the summary of significant changes. There was a budget error in 2020. An expense got excluded accidentally for marketing and taxi software licenses. So that has been correctly added in for 21's budget. 20's budget is able to cover it, so we don't have any shortfall this year. We're just basically correcting our budget for next year.
Okay, thank you. And then under other financing uses, there's a huge number there for 2020 total estimated actual.
So that, again, this fund has has the CARES funds that have come in. So those funds weren't anticipated. We are recognizing that if we don't spend them this year, they will be carried over to next year. So that other financing uses line is how we recognize that carry forward or use of those funds, because they are restricted to use in the highway.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I would look for a motion. Moved by Will, I'll second it. All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Okay. Our next meeting date is October 28th, 2020.
Thank you.
This meeting's adjourned.